My boyfriend, whom I'll call BP, and I have been together for 3 years. Despite the length of our relationship, we don't live together. I currently share an apartment with two housemates, while BP has his own place. This living arrangement means we can only see each other a few times a week, and even then, we rarely spend more than 2 consecutive days together. It's not an ideal situation, but it's what works for us, given the circumstances. My housemates are both assistants, and because of their demanding jobs and long shifts, they're often away. This setup has allowed BP and me to enjoy some privacy when he visits. For the most part, our relationship has been incredibly fulfilling. BP is everything I could want. Kind, supportive, and undeniably attractive. I've always felt lucky to have him. However, earlier this year, I made a decision that completely changed everything. I downloaded a dating chat app. To this day, I'm not entirely sure why I did it. It wasn't because BP and I were having problems. On the contrary, things between us were going well. I wasn't feeling neglected or unhappy. If I'm being honest, I think I was simply bored in a superficial, restless way. I've always had impulsive tendencies, and in that moment, I gave in to them without thinking about the consequences. At first, my interactions on the app were casual and harmless. I chatted with a few men, telling myself it was all in good fun. But over time, the conversations escalated. They became more flirtatious and, eventually, overly sexual. I started exchanging nude photos with some of them. I knew what I was doing was wrong. Every time I sent a message or a picture, there was a nagging voice in the back of my mind reminding me that I was betraying BP's trust. But I rationalized my behavior by telling myself that as long as I didn't meet these men in person, it wasn't real cheating. I convinced myself that the digital nature of the interactions somehow made them less significant. Looking back now, I see how flawed and harmful that mindset was. Emotional and digital infidelity are just as damaging as physical cheating, if not more so, because they erode trust and intimacy in ways that are hard to repair. Yesterday, the reality of my actions caught up with me in the worst possible way. BP decided to come over unexpectedly. Normally, he would text me before visiting, but this time he didn't. He said he wanted to surprise me, and since he has a key to my apartment for emergencies, he let himself in. I was in my bedroom, completely naked, FaceTiming with one of the men I had been chatting with. I didn't hear BP enter, so I had no idea he was there until I saw him standing in the doorway. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, watching. The look on his face was a mix of shock, hurt, and disbelief. I panicked. My first instinct was to slam my laptop shut, but BP reached it before I could. He saw everything. The man on the screen, the context of our conversation, all of it. Without raising his voice or arguing, BP simply said he was done. He handed me back the laptop, turned around, and left. I tried to stop him, but he wouldn't stay. He didn't even give me a chance to explain or apologize. The finality of his words hit me like a ton of bricks. Since then, I've been in a constant state of panic and heartbreak. I've tried calling and texting him repeatedly, but he won't answer. Today, I managed to get him to speak to me briefly, but the conversation was devastating. BP told me there's no chance of reconciliation. He said he can't see a future where he could ever trust me again, and honestly, I don't blame him. What I did was a complete betrayal, and I've shattered the foundation of trust we spent 3 years building. In the aftermath, I've taken several steps to address my actions. I've deleted the dating app and all the associated accounts. I've also logged out of my NSFW social media profiles, where I used to share explicit content. Additionally, I've scheduled a therapy appointment to start exploring the underlying reasons behind my behavior. I've been transparent with BP about all of these steps, hoping that he might see how serious I am about changing. But none of it has made a difference. BP told me it's too little, too late. He's adamant that he doesn't want anything to do with me anymore. I feel completely wrecked. I've been trying to make sense of why I acted this way, but I haven't been able to come up with a satisfying answer. It feels like I was on autopilot, seeking attention and validation without considering the consequences. I've always struggled with impulsive behavior, but this is the first time it's had such a catastrophic impact. In previous relationships, I've been unfaithful as well, but those situations felt different because my former partners were also cheaters. It seemed like a toxic cycle that didn't really matter. But BP is different. He's always been loyal and loving, and he deserves so much better than what I did to him. During our brief conversation today, I told BP that I think I have issues with self-control and impulse management. He dismissed it, saying that while it may be true, it's not an excuse for my actions. He's right. I'm not trying to excuse what I did, only to understand it so I can make sure it never happens again. I know that the fact I never physically met any of the men doesn't lessen the betrayal. The emotional and digital infidelity was enough to destroy BP's trust in me. Seeing the pain in his eyes is unbearable, and I hate myself for being the cause of it. Despite everything, I still love BP deeply and want to fight for our relationship. I know I can't force him to forgive me or give me another chance, but I'm desperate to show him how genuinely sorry I am. I've started journaling to process my emotions and plan to attend therapy regularly to work on my impulsiveness and the deeper issues behind my actions. My question now is, how do I demonstrate my remorse without pushing BP further away? And if reconciliation truly is impossible, how do I learn to accept that and move forward without letting the guilt and shame consume me? When I bring up the idea of reconciliation or even try to talk about rebuilding any emotional connection, he immediately shuts me down. He makes it clear he's not interested. What hurts the most is the contradiction in his actions. He's comfortable being physically close, but completely rejects any emotional intimacy. This dynamic makes me feel like I'm being used, as if my worth to him has been reduced to mere physical satisfaction. It's hard to understand how someone who once loved me can now only want this one aspect of our relationship, leaving everything else behind. It's painful to feel like I'm no longer seen as a whole person in his eyes, but just a way to fulfill his physical needs. At the same time, I can't ignore my own role in how we got here. I made mistakes, serious ones. I wasn't fully honest with him during our relationship. I engaged in what's known as trickle-truthing, revealing important details bit by bit rather than all at once. Back then, I rationalized it, convincing myself he didn't care about the full truth, so it wouldn't matter. But now I see how damaging and unfair that was. I assured him multiple times that I was being completely honest, only for more details to come out later, reopening old wounds and breaking his trust again. Since our separation 2 months ago, I've been making a concerted effort to change. I've committed to being fully transparent, unburdening myself of every lie and secret I carried. It's been incredibly challenging but also freeing. Letting go of those hidden truths has lifted a weight off my shoulders. But despite my efforts, he's made it clear that my honesty now doesn't mean anything to him. It feels as though no matter what I do, it's too late to make a difference. I've been in therapy, trying to address the deeper issues within myself. Recently, I even increased my counseling sessions to twice a week because I'm determined to get to the root of my behavior. I want to understand why I made the choices I did, why I allowed myself to betray someone I love, and how I can make sure it never happens again. I'm not just doing this for the hope of reconciliation. I'm doing it for myself. I want to be someone who can maintain a healthy, loving relationship, someone who feels secure and worthy of love. Despite all this work, I often feel lost in the process. He's repeatedly told me he no longer cares about our relationship and doesn't see a future where he could ever trust me again. I understand that trust, once broken, is incredibly difficult to rebuild, and I know I've hurt him in profound ways. Still, I can't let go of the hope that with enough time and effort, we might find our way back to each other. I hold on to the love we once shared and the dreams we had for the future, even though it feels like I'm clinging to something that's slipping further out of reach. At the same time, I feel like I'm failing in every possible way. Our communication is almost non-existent. When we do talk, it's usually brief and surface level. The only time we spend together is when he wants physical intimacy, but even then, there's no warmth or connection. I often go along with it because I'm afraid that if I say no, he'll stop coming over entirely, and I'll lose him completely. It's a heartbreaking cycle. I'm trying to hold on to him in any way I can, but every interaction leaves me feeling emptier. When we do have conversations that touch on our past or our emotions, they often devolve into conflict. He becomes angry, sometimes even cruel with his words, and I find myself retreating, shutting down, and crying. I know he's hurting, and I know I'm the cause of much of that pain. I've tried to be patient, to absorb his anger without reacting defensively, because I believe he has a right to express his feelings. But the intensity of his anger is overwhelming, and I'm struggling to cope with it. It feels like I'm drowning under the weight of both his pain and my own. I want to be there for him, to support him as he works through the hurt I've caused, but it feels like he doesn't want my support. Instead, it seems like he wants to punish me, to make me feel the full extent of his pain. I can't blame him for feeling that way, but it's exhausting, and I don't know how much more I can endure. I keep reminding myself that this is the cost of my actions. If I truly want to make amends and work toward reconciliation, I have to accept the consequences, no matter how painful. But this is so much harder than I ever imagined it would be. I feel like I'm losing myself in this process. I'm trying to take responsibility for my past mistakes, but in doing so, I'm also losing my sense of self-worth. It's a constant battle to find a balance between accountability and self-preservation. How do I keep going when it feels like there's no hope? How do I continue working toward reconciliation when he is so firmly opposed to it? Through therapy, I've started to uncover some painful truths about myself. I struggle with deep-seated insecurities and a persistent belief that I'm not enough. This has led me to seek validation and attention from others in unhealthy ways, even when it meant betraying the people I care about. It's a pattern I've fallen into more than once, and it's something I'm deeply ashamed of. I've also realized that I have a tendency to sabotage my own happiness. When things are going well, I can't fully accept it. Deep down, I don't believe I deserve to be happy, so I end up doing something to ruin it. It's a painful cycle, one that I'm committed to breaking. My therapist is helping me work through these issues, and I'm determined to make lasting changes. Even with all this self-awareness and effort, I'm still filled with doubt. Have I done too much damage to ever repair what's been broken? Can he ever forgive me? Or have I lost him for good? I want to believe there's still a chance for us, but I don't know if that's realistic anymore. His actions are so contradictory, seeking physical closeness but rejecting everything else, and it leaves me questioning everything. I'm trying to respect his boundaries while also holding on to hope, but the confusion and pain are overwhelming. I don't know how to break this destructive cycle we're in, where his anger and my guilt keep feeding into each other. Every day feels like a struggle, and I'm constantly searching for answers I'm not sure exist.